Okay, welcome to the replay, and to all of you joining me live, welcome. Sean, thank you for joining. Luis, King John Washer, welcome to today's broadcast. Today we're going to talk about 3 important memory principles to help you memorize anything, and I'm going to let you know how I use these principles to memorize all 100 plus of my students' names. Let me turn this around and say a quick hello. So, my name is Dr. Joe McCullough. Let me move this up. I'm the physics program chair at Cabrillo College in Santa Cruz, California, and I made a commitment to get on Periscope every single day to share daily doses of dopamine through education, entertainment, and inspiration. And today I want to talk about memory, 3 important memory techniques and how you can use them to memorize anything quickly. And then I'll tell you how I use them specifically to memorize all of my students' names in a day or 2, and actually just a couple hours total of study time. And let me just say, stupid humans joined. Welcome. I was in Vegas last weekend, or this just coming weekend. I got back yesterday, and I committed to learning every single one of my students' names over the weekend. And even though I was in Las Vegas enjoying myself, using just a few simple techniques, I was able to quickly memorize all of their names. So let me share with you those techniques, and then I'll go through specifically how I applied them to memorizing my students' names, and I'll give you a great online tool that you can use. First memory technique is called spaced repetition. What this means is, if you're going to learn something, you have to spread out the learning, spread out the studying. You cannot cram information and have it retained long term. So whenever you're trying to memorize something, I think of studying in short bursts and then spreading those out over time. So what I did when studying my students' names is I studied them for about 15 minutes at a time, 8 or 9 times throughout the weekend. So I studied for 15 minutes, did something else. 3 or 4 hours later, I studied for another 15 minutes, did something else. The next day, as soon as I woke up, I studied their names again, studied them before I go to bed. So spaced repetition means you want to spread out your studying, you want to repeat your studying, but spaced out over time. Think about this. It's much better to spend 4 half-hour study sessions spread out through time than a 3 or 4 hour study session in one evening. You cannot cram and have things retained long term. Second memory principle is active recall, and this is a big one. Active recall means you're actively trying to retrieve the information from your memory banks without looking at any outside source. Let me tell you how I see my students do this. Oftentimes I teach physics, and the way I see students study a lot is they look at a problem, look at the solution, look at a problem, look at the solution, and they think they understand the material. But unless you're actively trying to retrieve the information on your own, that you're not going to remember it. Hey, Alwyn, welcome. We're talking about 3 memory principles to help you remember anything, and then how I applied that to quickly memorize over 100 of my students' names in just a short amount of time. So the first thing was spaced repetition, spacing out your studying for short bursts. How's it going? It's going good. I actually surprised them. I had every single one of my students' names memorized. I teach college physics. Active recall means anytime you're studying, you want to be trying to retrieve the information from your memory banks without looking at the answers, without looking at any outside source. And I'll show you what I mean in terms of students. Oh my God, I'm taking that this year. Outstanding. I'm going to be doing some really cool scopes about physics demonstrations. I've already shown a few. And then the third memory principle is association. Anytime you can associate old information to new information, it's going to be that much more memorable. And in terms of memorizing students' names, you want to try and associate their name or their face with something you already know. What that's going to do is connect the old, connect new information to old information and make it that much more memorable. Now, how do I do this with my students? First thing I do is I take pictures of all my students and I have them write down where they're sitting. And then what I do is I make a Word document. I don't want to show you too close because I don't want to show my students pictures, but I make a Word document and I write down their names right below their face. And then what I do is I study that Word document for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then I print out another Word document that doesn't have their names underneath, and I try and write them all down. And then I do that 4 or 5 times, and by the 4th or 5th time, you'd be amazed at just how well it clicks. Now, that's how I used to do it, and then I found an online tool, which I absolutely love. I'm recommending to all my students. It's called, what is it called? Quizlet. Quizlet.com. What it is an online flashcards utility. You can create flashcards online, study them online. Which university am I at? I teach at Cabrillo College. It's a community college in Santa Cruz, California. Quizlet is an awesome resource, and let me show you how I use it to memorize names. Let me turn the camera around for a second. What I did is I just created a little example for you that is not my students, but just an example that I wanted to show you. So let's say I was trying to memorize a bunch of students' names. So what I did is I uploaded all of their pictures and their names, and I can use this as a flashcard. And the other nice thing about Quizlet is you can record your own voice. So let me just show you. So I would look at this picture, try and remember the name,
Angelina Jolie.
and then I record my voice saying the name.
Russell Crowe. Ben Affleck. Leonardo DiCaprio.
And the really great thing about this site is it also has an app for the iPhone and for iPad or any smartphone. And this is really great because what I did in Vegas is I had my smartphone at the poker table, and in between hands I was flipping through different students and looking at their names. So what you can do on the iPad, same thing.
Angelina Jolie. Russell Crowe. Ben Affleck. Leonardo DiCaprio.
And it's not just for faces. So if I were to do, let's say, a physics exam.
Third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Which color in the visible spectrum has the lowest frequency? Which has the highest? Which color in the visible spectrum has the lowest frequency?
So in terms of what we were talking about, spaced repetition. So instead of studying for 2 or 3 hours at one time, I studied 15-minute bursts. Let me turn this around. So instead of studying for 2 or 3 hours at one time, I studied in short bursts of about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I took a break. And then 3 or 4 hours later, I would study short bursts, 15 or 20 minutes, take a break again, and I repeated that 5 or 6 times over the course of 3 or 4 days. So rather than studying 2 hours at one time, I broke it up into little chunks, and I spread those chunks out over multiple days. This is important from a memory point of view because it takes time for your memories to consolidate. Our memories are only really stored when we sleep. So what you want to do ideally, and one of the things I recommend to my students, study something you really need to know right before you go to bed. And what that's going to do is going to be one of the first things processed by your brain that's going to start to transfer that information to long-term memory, and then as soon as you wake up, study it again. So spaced repetition, I studied my students' names 5 or 6 or 7 times over the course of 3 or 4 days, studying in 15-20 minute chunks. 2, active recall. What this means is as soon as I see the face, I do not look at their name. So I would look at the face, try and retrieve the information on my own before I looked at their name. This is one of the reasons that flashcards are so great. And then the third one is association. When I'm looking at my students' names, I'm trying to associate the name or the face with something I already know, creating some kind of mental image. Anytime that you can associate new information to old information or associate their name or their face with something memorable, it's going to stick. So let me give you a couple examples for these stars and how I would memorize. So Angelina Jolie. Her name, Angelina, kind of like angel. Jolie kind of sounds like jolly. If I was memorizing her name, I would picture Angelina Jolie as a jolly angel. And I would create a vivid image in my brain of her being an angel but very happy and jolly. Russell Crowe. Crowe. I would imagine Russell Crowe being attacked by a bunch of crows or something like that, where I'm actually picturing the image in my brain. Do you want to know more than face and name? Get to know something more? Yes. If there's something you know, thank you for saying that. If you know something about the person and you can associate that person with a particular kind of activity that they like, or a book that they read, or what they do, it's going to make it that much more memorable. Another example.
Ben Affleck.
If I was trying to remember Ben Affleck, Affleck reminds me of the Aflac duck. Affleck! Ben, as in maybe bending over. So I might create an image of Ben Affleck bent over being attacked by the Aflac duck. So I'd like to see Russell Crowe attacked by crows. So again, let me just quickly turn this around. So when memorizing information, there's 3 key points that are going to help you memorize anything, and I apply them to my students' names. The first one, spaced repetition. When you're trying to memorize something, don't try and do it in one night. It's not as effective. You talk with your hands. Yes, I talk with my hands a lot because I'm a very kinesthetic person, and it adds a second layer, third layer. If you've seen any of my previous scopes, when I teach information, I try and connect information to some kind of hand motion. It adds a kinesthetic component and makes it that much more memorable. So, spaced repetition, don't study all at one time. Spread out your studying over multiple days. Think about studying in short chunks, many chunks spread out throughout multiple days. Active recall. Flashcards are an awesome study tool. There's a difference between what I call recallable memory and recognizable memory. Recognizable memory is something like you read the sentence, Paris is the capital of France, and you recognize that that's true. There's a difference between recognizing something's true and then being able to retrieve the information on your own. So there's a difference between reading Paris is the capital of France and knowing it's true, and being able to answer the question, what is the capital of France? Is it Quizlet you use? Yes. Quizlet is awesome. I highly recommend it. And then the third one is association. If you can associate the person's face or their name with some kind of crazy mental image, it's going to be much more memorable. Well, that is it for today. Before I sign off, I want to pause and see if there's any questions I can answer about memory. Again, the 3 things I discussed were spaced repetition, spacing out your studying in multiple periods. Which Quizlet feature? I'll get to that in 1 second. Active recall, where you're actively trying to retrieve the information before you look at the solution. And then association. So let me touch on Quizlet real fast because I really like the program. Now, Quizlet is free as long as you don't want to upload any pictures or record your own voice. So
what is Newton's third law?
You could create a bunch of...
For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
A bunch of flashcards with just text, and that's free. However, if you want to be able to upload images and record your own voice, that's $15 a year, which is not that much to ask. And the nice thing about Quizlet is they have an iPhone app. They have a smart... Use that to study whenever you want. So I have all of my students' names in Quizlet, and I can use my iPhone to study at any time I want. And I just heard my wife and daughter got home, so I'm about to sign out. Before I do, let me answer any quick questions you have on memory and how you can use these techniques. My mom's caregiver scared it will be M1 days, tips to help my memory. I didn't quite catch that. It disappeared. If you want to ask me one more time, that would be great. If not, let me just tell you who I am. Alzheimer's. I don't have any kind of expertise in terms of Alzheimer's. Do you create a study set on Quizlet? I have not created study sets for my students. I've really been using Quizlet specifically to memorize my students' names. Worried about my memory. So let me just say real quick that memory is not something you're born with, either a great memory or a poor memory. The only thing there is a trained memory or an untrained memory. Everybody can improve their memory using simple techniques. There's a bunch of great books out there, and over the course of the next year, I'm going to be talking more about memory. Well, for those of you who've been with me the whole time, thank you so much. My name's Dr. Joe McCullough. I'm the physics program chair at Cabrillo College, and I made a commitment to get on Periscope every single day to share daily doses of dopamine through education, entertainment, and inspiration. Thank you. You're so welcome. Great session. Thank you. If you've enjoyed this, please follow me. Swipe from left to right on an iPhone, straight up on an Android. Follow me. Share this with people that you know. And I will be back tomorrow with some more great content. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Joe signing out.